Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic that might surprise you even if you think you know it pretty well, semaglutide.
Right.
But look, this isn't really about a new diet fad or some kind of quick fix. We're going to unpack two really fascinating sources today.
Yeah, they suggest that what happens when that constant noise of cravings finally goes quiet. It's about way more than just losing weight.
Exactly. We're looking at excerpts from a meeting with my friend Dan Hollis on semaglutide and also entry #1, the day the food craving didn't come.
Which are field notes from his work, yeah. And our mission here really is to explore these unexpected psychological insights.
Emotional insights, too.
Totally. The stuff that bubbles up when the kind of standard idea of hunger gets flipped on its head.
Because, like one source says, the world thinks being overweight is just about food, calories, discipline.
Yeah, the usual suspects.
Well, what if that's just wrong? What if it's about something else entirely? Okay, so let's dig in. Our first source, this meeting with Dan Hollis. It starts with this really striking claim. The author says he wasn't interviewing someone selling weight loss.
No.
He was talking to someone decoding emotional amnesia. Wow. I mean, that phrase alone, emotional amnesia.
It's powerful, isn't it? It suggests people are maybe forgetting or like pushing down the real emotional drivers behind why they eat.
Right. It completely challenges the usual story we hear about weight loss.
And what's really fascinating is how Dan Hollis builds on that. His core idea is that semaglutide, it gives you silence.
Violence.
Yeah. And he says silence gives you truth. It's not just about feeling less hungry in the, clinical way.
Yeah.
It's about the food itself stopping its chatter, like this loud background noise you've lived with for years finally just fades out.
Silence gives you truth. That's a pretty profound statement. How does he get there, though?
Yeah.
What makes him say people aren't, broken but just confused?
That's right, because that headline, "What if you weren't broken, just confused," is so different.
Worlds away from lose weight fast.
Exactly. Well, it seems to stem from his whole philosophy. Instead of pushing people to, sell their way out of feeling ashamed, which so many diet plans seem to do,
Oh, definitely.
he encourages them to actually sit in it long enough to learn something from it. He sees that quiet not as an empty space, but as a space for real self-reflection.
Okay.
So it's a different kind of medicine, as he puts it. It's not about willpower failure. It's an opportunity to figure things out. The confusion isn't about what diet to follow. It's about not getting why you reach for certain foods in the first place.
So, okay, if that's the core idea,
Uh-huh.
what does semaglutide actually do, according to Hollis? It's clearly not just about fat or hormones in his view.
Right.
He says it gives you a moment where food stops talking,
Yeah.
and then this part. And for some people, that's the first honest moment they've had in 20 years.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that kind of honesty,
Yeah.
after maybe decades of using food to cope,
Yeah.
that must feel incredibly jarring, maybe even scary.
Oh, absolutely unsettling. Which brings up a key point from the sources. If the food stops talking, then what?
Right. What fills the void?
Exactly. The challenge isn't that the drug fails. It's that, as Hollis puts it, no one taught them what to do with the quiet.
Ah.
That silence, especially when it replaces something you've leaned on for so long, can feel really destabilizing. It's like you've lost your favorite lie.
Wow. Lost your favorite lie. That's intense.
And that discomfort often sends people right back to what's familiar, Cheese puffs, cheat days, chaos, as the source says. It shows they haven't really grasped the root issue the quiet is revealing.
Okay, that sounds incredibly disorienting. Which I guess leads us perfectly into Kate's story from the field notes from the quiet window.
Yes.
She's 46, a mom. She's been on semaglutide for 2 months, lost about 7 pounds. Not a huge amount, maybe.
Relatively modest, yeah.
But the big surprise for her wasn't the number on the scale. It was, quote, the craving that didn't show up. What made that specific absence hit her so hard?
Well, Kate's relationship with food was deeply, deeply ingrained, almost like a ritual. The source says she knew the rhythm of hunger like other people know hymns.
Like clockwork.
Totally. Chips for that afternoon energy dip, bread when she felt lonely, cake for celebrations. It was all mapped out.
Okay.
And the source paints this really vivid picture, her walking past the pantry, this place loaded with emotional triggers, and just nothing reached back.
Nothing.
That silence, that lack of the usual signal, that was her moment. The automatic connection was just gone.
In this experience, this is what Dan Hollis calls the quiet window.
Exactly.
Whereas he says the food stops answering your questions and the real ones start talking.
But That quiet window, while it sounds liberating, it also opens up some really complex feelings. The sources talk about the grief of losing the thing that numbed you.
Grief. Even if that thing was bad for you.
Yeah, even if it was slowly unraveling your life. Kate wasn't necessarily missing the taste of the food. She missed the signal, that predictable rhythm.
The familiarity.
Right. And maybe most importantly, she missed the self-story that said, at least I know how to feel full. Losing that known, even if it was harmful, can feel like a huge void suddenly opening up.
You know, that makes so much sense. It's like quitting a bad habit that weirdly still gave you some kind of comfort or structure.
Exactly.
Kate described feeling weird, the house being too quiet, her own mind feeling like a library after hours. It really captures that feeling of disorientation. It's not just the food noise that's gone.
It's a whole internal framework that's shifted.
Yeah. And her big realization was everything feels like truth now, which sounds both freeing and maybe a bit terrifying.
Precisely. And this is where Dan Hollis says his real work starts. Not with the initial changes, but with what happens when people begin to hear those echoes. The echoes of all the years they use food to muffle the deeper questions. And this really prompts a question for you, listening right now. In your own quiet moments, what are you hungry for when it's not physical hunger?
Yeah.
Well-
Who are you without that constant chase for
Yeah.
something?
What's actually left when all that noise finally dies down? Those are the big questions that surface.
Okay, so if the answer isn't Tep Talks, and it's clearly not just the medication, what does Dan Hollis propose? He talks about building scaffolding. What does that even mean in this context?
Good question. Scaffolding is his practical answer to navigating that quiet, potentially overwhelming space.
Like support structures.
Exactly. Framework, identity, new rituals, even a new language to understand what's happening. The goal is clear. Not motivation, but momentum. Not restriction, but recognition.
Okay, I like that distinction.
Semaglutide, in this model, doesn't fix the emotional hunger. It just clears the runway so you can finally see what's trying to land.
Okay.
The scaffolding gives you the tools and the structure to actually deal with those deeper questions instead of just being swamped by them. It's about building new ways to cope, new ways to be.
And we see little glimpses of this in Kate's story, right? It's not some huge, dramatic turnaround described in the notes.
No, it's subtle.
It's a Wednesday where she didn't snack through her sadness. A Thursday where she reached for tea instead of automatically opening a second bottle of wine. And a Sunday where she took a walk. Not, to burn calories, but because it genuinely felt like a conversation with her future self. These feel like small choices, but profound ones.
They really are. Because the quiet finally gave her the space to make those choices consciously, maybe for the first time.
Yeah.
And it underlines that this is an ongoing thing. Kate is not done. She's not fixed. She hasn't magically become a different person overnight.
Right.
But the key thing is, she's here in the quiet, listening. And that, according to the source, is the real work. That's the real protocol.
Listening in the quiet. It all circles back to that core idea that emerged from the silence.
Yeah, it was never about the food.
So if you're listening and maybe you're walking through that kind of silence yourself,
Yeah.
if a craving didn't show up today, and that feels, well, more unsettling than you expected.
Then maybe this deep dive offers a different perspective. You're not broken. You might just be starting to really hear yourself again, perhaps for the first time in a long while.
Welcome to the quiet window. You're definitely not alone in this.
And really, this whole exploration of semaglutide just opens up a much bigger question for you, doesn't it? If food was maybe a way to quiet down deeper issues, what other parts of your life might have their own quiet windows? Areas where maybe noise or busyness is covering up some unaddressed truths? What story in a totally different part of your life might you be too full to finish,